Hey everyone, welcome back to my third installment of Big Goals, Little Steps. I'm super excited to do this. I am trying to get into a kind of flow where I record these every other weekend and upload them every other weekend. So that's what's coming. Okay, so just in case this is the first time you're watching one of these, my name is Sarah and I run Peppo Studios, which is an itty bitty, teeny tiny, brand new little small business. I paint watercolors and I'm really trying to get into the realm of surface pattern design. So I'm trying to create hand-painted surface pattern designs as my business. So the point of this series is to document all of the little steps that I'm taking to get towards some of my big picture business goals that I have. For me, this is a really good accountability thing so that I can show up every other week and say, you know, this is what I've done, this is what I'm setting out to do. And it's worked really well for me so far. And I've had a few folks reach out to me to say, who are in a similar stage of their business as I am, like meaning very early on, to say that it's kind of helpful to see someone who is also like in those early stages. So anyway, that's why I'm doing this. And the general structure that I like to go through is to first recap the goals that I had set out for the last 2 weeks, see how I did on those, and then lay out the goals that I have for the next 2 weeks. If you're interested in getting a bigger overview of my like bigger goals for the year for 2023, I lay those out in the very first Big Goals, Little Steps video. It'll be in the same playlist as this video. Okay, so I'm trying my best to keep these videos more concise than maybe they have been in the past. So I'm gonna start by jumping right in with my goals for the last 2 weeks. Okay, the first goal that I had laid out from the last 2 weeks was to finish this series of giraffe patterns that I had started. So I don't know if this was really my intention when I first set out to accomplish this goal, but really this has been a way for me to experiment with like a ton of different repeating pattern techniques, which has been super helpful. So basically these giraffe patterns, I started off with a hand-drawn repeat. So meaning I didn't create the repeat in Illustrator and Photoshop or something like that. I created it on a piece of paper, which is the first time I'd ever done that, just to kind of see what that process looked like. Then what I did is I took that hand-drawn like sketch and I digitized it, and then I drew on top of my sketch to create vectors in Illustrator. So that was one kind of combination of techniques that I used there. I learned everything about the drawing of the actual vectors from Mel Armstrong's Skillshare class. I literally think I've mentioned her in every Big Goals, Little Steps video so far, but I really find her super helpful. And that was really the first time that I had done digital drawing. It's very new to me, and it still feels like very awkward. Like I don't really know what I'm doing. But I think I learned a decent amount about kind of how the process works. I mean, I definitely think that it's going to be something that will be important to incorporate into my designs down the road, even though I have this vision of sticking with this kind of hand-painted look. I definitely think that getting good at digital creation is also going to be a really important thing. So I can show you here a picture of what that pattern ended up look like. I made a couple just using some of those digitally painted motifs. And I'll be honest, I don't love the way the pattern looks. It's not the aesthetic that I was going for. But like I said, I think I learned a lot about the digital creation kind of process. So, you know, I'm okay kind of with the fact that I didn't love it. But I didn't stop there. So then what I ended up doing, you'll have seen in my last Big Goals, Little Steps video that I was hand painting some giraffes too, because I said, okay, I want to compare these techniques of painting them digitally and then painting them physically, like traditionally, and then seeing kind of how my resulting patterns compare. So using these hand-painted giraffes, which were super like loose, not very like thought out or anything like that, I tried a couple different techniques with those as well. So I first started in Photoshop and I scanned those giraffes in, and I did some like trees and stuff too. I scanned them in, I touched them up in Photoshop, separated each motif, and then I built the pattern in Photoshop. So here, I'll start by showing you the actual resulting pattern, which spoiler alert, it's my favorite one of the giraffe series that I've done. I really like this like hand-painted, kind of loosey, organic look of the giraffes. This was the exact vibe that I was going for, so I'm really glad about that. I think though the process of creating this in Photoshop was kind of informative because I find it less, not seamless isn't the right word, but it doesn't flow as easily in Photoshop as it does in Illustrator. Like Illustrator is so well set up to create these repeating patterns, and Photoshop, it's just a little more clunky. You have to do some, like I have to have my phone out and like be adding and subtracting pixels and stuff to figure out where to move motifs, which just feels kind of annoying, and maybe it's something I'd get better at with time. So I found the process a little clunky. I also like when you're creating in Photoshop, you have like 400 layers as you create different motifs and stuff, and so I don't know a lot about the best way to like keep your files clean and just like not feel like I'm working against the file itself. So that's like where I'm torn a little bit, because I really like the resulting product. Like I said, that's the aesthetic that I was going for, but I felt like I was fighting with Photoshop a little bit to get there. So, you know, there's kind of like two sides to this, and just something that I'm continuing to play with. I didn't end there though. There was one more technique I wanted to try, which was taking those hand-painted motifs and then bringing them into Illustrator and vectorizing them. Because like I said, I really like the interface of Illustrator better for creating patterns, but I haven't successfully really been able to achieve the watercolor kind of loosey organic look that I'm going for in Illustrator, because in case you don't know, Illustrator is a vector-based program. I'm not going to get into all the differences between vectors and rasters, but basically Photoshop is a raster-based program, so it's the kind of thing that if you zoom in really close, you're going to see the pixels of your artwork, whereas in Illustrator it's vector-based, so you can zoom in or blow up your image as large as you want, and it's never gonna get blurry. Basically, there's a lot more you can figure out about vectors and rasters and things like that, but that's the basics. And like I said, I think Illustrator is just easier to create these repeating patterns in. So basically I took those motifs that I had built in Photoshop and I brought them into Illustrator and then used image trace to vectorize them. The result is not bad. They look like watercolor and loosey and whatever, but I struggle with this technique too. There's a couple things that I don't love about the Illustrator vectorizing technique, which is that first, when I brought in those motifs, I felt like there was a lot that I needed to clean up. Because you can imagine when you bring in a watercolor painting into Illustrator, it tries to find the edges, and it's rough. I mean, it's not going to be a perfectly straight, sharp line or anything like that. And so I felt like I needed to spend a decent amount of time like cleaning up some of those edges. And I don't know if that's actually worth it or not. You know, I'm not really sure. But I think the bigger issue for me that I've encountered is that these vectors, these vectorized paintings are huge, meaning they have like tens of thousands of anchor points on them. And basically what that means is that it makes your document really, really sluggish. And I have simplified them as much as I can. There's like a simplify tool within Illustrator and you can kind of minimize the size of your motifs, but even in doing so, it's still really clunky. And also like there's only so much you can simplify before you start going away from kind of the look you're going for. So that's something I'm playing with here. I can show you the resulting pattern that I've made from that one so far. This one I did bring in the trees and stuff. I want to play a little bit more with this because this pattern I put together in like 5 minutes or 10 minutes or something, like after I spent a long time vectorizing everything. So the pattern I didn't put a lot of thought into. It could be much more beautiful. But yeah, so anyway, all of this to say, I tried a bunch of different techniques and I don't really know what my favorite one is quite yet, because like I said, I'm kind of torn between this Photoshop Illustrator situation. I know a lot of folks will say the industry standard is Illustrator, but I think the reality, I mean, I don't know, I'm no expert in this at all, but given what I want to do and the image or the vision that I have for my products, and the fact that what my art would end up on, means that I think if I do high quality scans of my images and high quality or like 300 DPI or higher in my Photoshop files, it might be okay. I might be able to get away with just using rasters. but that does mean that I have to use the kind of clunkier Photoshop interface. So I don't know, something I'm going to continue working on. So much for keeping this video short. I had a lot to say about that apparently. Okay, so the next couple of goals that I laid out for the past couple of weeks are going to go a lot quicker than that first one, I promise. So the next one was to switch over to the paid version of Squarespace and also to transfer my domain over from GoDaddy to Squarespace. I had originally laid out that domain transfer as part of my first Big Goals Little Steps series, and that didn't happen then, so it was pushed over to the last one, and I did both of these things. So my Squarespace membership is now set for the year, and I am in the process of transferring the domain. It's something that can take a little bit of time, but basically I'm all set up to build my website. So I kind of have the framework for my website laid out. Like I have the pages created, you know, like a homepage and an about page and like a blog and whatever, all kinds of pages on my website. I am just like playing with fake branding right now, so like I pulled some colors that I think look nice together, but I'll talk about branding in a second. But I'm basically creating this like structure for the website with a couple things in mind. Firstly, I know the first time I create a website, it's not going to be like the best thing ever, and so I would rather do kind of a trial run before then I can go back and like I'm never gonna finalize my website, but I can kind of go back and tweak the things now that I have like worked the Squarespace muscle a little bit and figured out how it all works. So that's part of it, and then the other part is I am working on branding with a brand designer. I've mentioned this in the past couple of videos, and so my kind of thought process is once the brand kit is complete, then I can go kind of plug everything into my website and it's all already kind of built, rather than like having to build a website around this branding that I have or whatever. So yeah, that's something that's pretty cool, something that I have coming down the line. Okay, I won't say too much more about the website. I'll talk about that a little bit more in my goals for the next 2 weeks. Now, on the topic of branding, my last goal for the past 2 weeks was to complete the second questionnaire that came from the designer that I have hired. This was a more extensive questionnaire than the first one, and it really made me think, which is good. It was awesome. It had a lot of important and in-depth questions about my brand, which I guess makes sense coming from a brand designer, but it made me really reflect on some of the big picture goals that I have in my business, like things like where do you see your business in 5 to 10 years, which is important stuff to be thinking about. Things like what's your ideal customer profile, or like she had a question that was like, if your business was a person, how would you describe it? So all kinds of things that really made me think, and it took me a while to fill out this questionnaire, but it's done and I did it. And so now kind of the ball is in her court for the moment, and she's going to be working on some stuff, and then she'll get back to me about what I need to do next. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to my goals for the next 2 weeks. So my hope is that I'll be able to get more done in the next 2 weeks. The last 2 weeks were really busy for me in terms of my 9 to 5 that I do. So my day job was just, there was a lot going on with that this past couple of weeks. So I haven't had as much time to work on Peppo Studio stuff, and I think one of the hardest things for me in the past 2 weeks is like I was doing progress on a lot of my goals, but I really did not have that much time to like actually paint. So I've like barely touched paintbrush to paper in the past 2 weeks. So with that in mind, I have a couple of goals for the next 2 weeks that have to do with more creating than what I have been doing the past 2 weeks. Okay, so my first goal is kind of a fun one. I follow this account on Instagram called Sketch Design Repeat. She's really cool. And she hosts these 3x3 challenges, which basically is a challenge to create 3 designs in 3 weeks, surrounding a general prompt that she sends out. It's kind of cool. I will put a link to it below if anyone's interested in doing something similar. But she basically she sent out the prompts, the first prompt yesterday, and then you have to create the design by next Friday. So you have like 1 week to create each one, and then next Friday she'll send out the next one and whatever. So I think for me this is helpful to have like a little bit of structure. She's created a mood board that I can look at and see get some inspiration from that. And I don't know, for me it's just going to be a good exercise to keep kind of working that surface pattern design muscle and to keep playing with new techniques. So of course for the next 2 weeks my goal would be to complete the first 2 prompts in that sketch, design, repeat 3x3 challenge. The first prompt is snowman. So I'm gonna do some of that today just to see kind of how it goes, and I'm gonna be hand painting it. So yeah, and then I'm gonna play with different techniques again, whether that be building the pattern in Photoshop or building it in Illustrator, you know, where we're gonna figure it out with some time. So that is goal number 1. Okay, goal number 2 is a kind of easy one, to be honest, but I wanted to write it down anyway, and that is to finish Bonnie Christine's Secret to Success workshop. So this past week, she started her annual Secrets to Success in Surface Pattern Design workshop, and I have been following along. I've been watching it all, and I found it super helpful. I mean, that's probably not a surprise to anyone who knows surface pattern design, because Bonnie is like the industry leader. It's pretty impressive what she has done. But she's incredibly helpful, very knowledgeable, and I've really loved listening to her live sessions, which I haven't been able to do live because I am at the office usually during that time, but I've been watching the replays, and it's super helpful to hear her insights in this whole industry. And so she has some homework for us to do this weekend, which is kind of doing some deep thinking about some of the prompts that she's set out. But anyway, in the next 2 weeks, well, actually next week, she's going to be finishing up the workshop, and so it's on my to-do list to kind of finish that workshop. And as part of that, I want to do, there's a couple of helpful worksheets that she's created as part of the workshop, and I want to print out and kind of fill out some of those for myself. For me, I think maybe the most helpful one is this roadmap that she's created to help you visualize like the different stages that there are in this journey, and also things like identifying rewards for yourself when you hit certain milestones, which I think is really important, because otherwise you can just like grind, and then I don't know, there's no demarcation of like, you did this big thing and it's awesome. So that's something I need to think about a little bit too. So anyway, one of my goals is to finish that workshop, including filling out some of those worksheets. Okay, this next goal is kind of nebulous because I don't really know what more I can say, but it's basically to do whatever next steps come up for my branding. Like I mentioned in the last section, the branding is basically out of my court right now, and it's in the designer's court, so she's going to come back to me and tell me what she needs from me next. I'm pretty sure what that will be is an initial check-in. So she has this Notion database where you can see kind of the progress of everything, and the next step, I believe, is going to be an initial check-in where she's going to show me some initial concepts, some sketches, things like that, and we can chat about if I like the direction it's going in or not, or if we need to pivot or whatever. So I think that's what's next for me, but I can't know for sure until I hear back from her via email. So updates to come on that one. So we'll see. I generally try to set more specific and measurable goals than that, but I don't really know what the next step is going to be for that, so I'll keep you updated. Okay, next goes back to the website. So now that I'm kind of locked in on Squarespace, I want to spend a little bit more time building a couple of the actual pages. So I think some of the more important ones are going to be, I mean, they're all going to be important, but my homepage, and then also my portfolio. So my portfolio is going to live on my website, and it's funny to imagine it right now because many of the patterns I've created currently, I would not put on a portfolio. I do not like most of them, but I want a space for them to be able to live, you know, like a space where I can put the ones that I love and show mock-ups and things like that of what it could look like as products. And so anyway, I'm going to build the framework for that, so these do have a place to land. And then the homepage, I don't really know what it's going to look like quite yet, so that's something I'm just going to play with. Again, with the caveat that this will all change somewhat once I do kind of finalize the branding. But again, just working on the framework for me has been really helpful. And to be honest, it's something that I enjoy doing, like kind of getting in to the, it's not really the back end, but kind of the back end of Squarespace and of website building, and just to see how everything works together. It's kind of fun, and just figuring out the functionality of Squarespace. I've enjoyed it. So it's one of those things that, like, if I come home from the office and it's been a long day at work, and like sometimes you're like not in the mood to get out the paint and the paper and whatever if you're really tired, the website building has been kind of a fun thing for me to do on those nights. So Yeah. Okay, the last goal is, again, a kind of nebulous one. I don't know. I guess I'm not really being that specific in this Biggles Little Steps kind of installation, but I think I needed it after my last kind of crazy 2 weeks. Anyway, my last goal is to paint some motifs of whatever inspires me. So as I mentioned, I just haven't had the time to paint a lot in the past 2 weeks, and it's a big bummer. And so I want to carve some time out in the next 2 weeks to just paint for fun, paint whatever I feel like, paint whatever inspires me. That's what I loved about that patisserie series I did, is that I just felt like painting those. I'm giving myself the freedom to paint whatever is inspiring me at the moment. So that's what I'm gonna do. And if I turn it into a pattern, then I'll turn it into a pattern. We'll see kind of what the next 2 weeks end up looking like and see like if I have time to do that or whatever. So anyway, that's that. Okay, so a quick recap of my upcoming goals for the next 2 weeks. First, it's to do the first 2 prompts of that 3x3 design challenge. So this week's prompt is snowman. I don't know what next week's prompt is, but I'll let you know in the next video. Then my next goal is to finish Bonnie Christine's Secrets to Success in Surface Pattern Design workshop, which will be wrapping up next week. And as a part of that, I'm going to be filling out some of the workbooks and like worksheets that correspond with that workshop. Okay, then I have a nebulous goal of whatever the next steps look like for my branding. I think it's going to be a meeting with my brand designer, and we'll see what that looks like. So updates to come on that front. Okay, then we're in the website design kind of world here, and I want to build a couple of the pages for my website, including the homepage and then my portfolio page. Okay, and my last goal was just to paint whatever inspires me in a given moment, because I really need some more time to be creative, to paint, to create bad art, and just like let my imagination go, because it's been a minute. So those are my goals for the next 2 weeks. As always, I tend to post the most updates on Instagram, so if you don't already follow me on Instagram, my handle is just Peppo Studios. I'm on my stories all the time, chatting away, so feel free to come find me there, and you'll see updates on all of these goals throughout the next couple of weeks. So with that, thank you as always for watching this video. Let me know what goals that you have if you are also a small business. I know many of the folks who watch these videos are in a similar stage of their business as mine, so I'd be really curious to know what goals you're working on, what kind of time frame you're working on, and yeah, I'd love to hear from you. So thank you, and I will catch you again in 2 weeks. Bye everyone.